Hi there, I'm Scott Snyder, Seedcare Specialist Syngenta, and I'm here today to talk to you about one of our relatively new products called Draco. And it's a biological product, a dual stream bacteria biological seed treatment to be specific. And while biologicals to a lot of growers does sound new in the space of soybean seed treatments, it's actually relatively old or tried and tested at least technology. Most growers, if you just ask them off the cuff if they've ever used a biological seed treatment in soybeans, they'd likely say no. But what often is missed when asking a grower a question like that is the fact that they've been using inoculants for a number of years. And when we think about some of these inoculants, myself included as a young kid, I was on the back of the drill stirring up the peat mixture into the soybeans, trying to space it out enough that we're getting it kind of even. And that technology has come a long way now, where there's liquid formulations that you can apply on the seed with the rest of your seed treatments, and that's basically the history of where biologicals have been, and now we're bringing them into some more specific uses with agronomic solutions that we're bringing to growers as a seed treatment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just share out my screen here. And this is a subset of a much larger slide deck around Draco, but I just wanted to go over a couple of the key slides, as well as some some experiences we've had with the product and growers have had with the product over the last couple of years. So this page here just outlines what we're covering here. So it is actually for corn and soybeans. I'm going to focus this presentation geared towards soybeans. But it is also in corn, and it works on a couple different things. When we're talking soybeans, it's more specific seed rot and seedling blight caused by Rhizoc, or Rhizoctonia solani, partial suppression of soybean cyst nematodes, and also has water use efficiency. So the fact that we have a dual strain biological product, basically the product concept behind that is the one bacteria will work on some of the pest diseases and SCN, and then the other is more geared towards water use efficiency, bolstering that in the soybean plant. And so it's kind of a two-pronged approach. So if you want to read the fine details there, those are the two active ingredients, the two bacteria. Two strains of bacteria that are in that. I won't try to pronounce that first one there, but as you can see, there's two different ones, and they're both acting on basically different agronomic issues, either pests or the water use efficiency. And there's some more specific information there for the folks actually applying it. And what it does, in the kind of textbook definition of it, is indirect disease inhibition. So what that means is it creates a biofilm, and that biofilm acts as both a physical and chemical barrier to any part of the process that causes these pests to penetrate in the roots and kind of take over and do their damage. And there's some fancy pictures down there with different methods where they can actually capture a visual of how this is happening and what's going on. So when we first trialed this product, that was in 2021, and you can see down there Draco on the left, Check on the right, Check being for Tenzoviantis 4. And this year we varied a little bit, but in general it was pretty wet, pretty growthy conditions, and we had a very kind of great first look at when there's growth conditions. What are we going to see out of Draco? So when there's really good growth conditions, there's still, of course, harder areas in the fields, headlands where it's compacted, high sandy knolls, just topographical or agronomical areas that are at a disadvantage. And what we saw there was early on we saw differences in growth, like in this picture, and then later on that translated to later in the season to instances like this, where these plants were taken from a stressed part of the field, and you can see on the right-hand side where the Draco was, the water use efficiency and the better and larger and more expansive root system enabled those plants to still develop to either their full potential or closer to their full potential at the very least, and create a situation where there's a much larger plant and lots of pods. Now, the question there, the first concern we got from growers is, well, what happens in the good part of the fields? We don't want them to be 6 to 12 inches taller in the good parts of the fields, where the stuff with the check without Draco is already pretty growthy, because then we're going to have, you know, our number one concern, white mold. So the good news is we were able to document in those areas, you know, we did see a slightly larger plant, but it was nothing drastic enough to give us those concerns in those non-stressed parts of the field. So, you know, just directly comparing those two situations or those two spots in fields, and we saw this in a number of trials. Basically, it enabled the plant to perform to the best of its ability in the tough areas and keep up with it wasn't impacted, just keeping up with the growth in the good areas of the field, as well as having some of those you know, agronomic issues under control, like soybean cyst nematode and rhizoctonia, and just having an effect on them, partial suppression of the SCN, and that was really encouraging to see in a year where it was very, you know, very good growth conditions for most overall. And we did see some of this in 2022, not necessarily as much with the height of the plants in this scenario in Port Hope, where they did get some adequate rainfall and some good conditions, but you can see it in the root mass, and then obviously in the pod set and everything that would have come from that much larger and healthier plant all along. But that, you know, was not indicative of the conditions we had in the majority of Ontario, which was very dry. So the interesting thing is, even when we had experiences this past year in 2022 where we didn't see in any of my trials, I did not see any height differences, any root mass differences, or root health differences really, because it was so dry. We still did see positive results as far as the trials go, and the yield results, when you take them all and average them out and look at the win rate and the yield advantage overall, was still right in line with what we had when we acquired this product and got a data set with it. It was largely almost solely out of the US, and that data set told us a 1.1 bushel advantage in soybeans. Now, with our data that we've added to that, and that was a really big data set. It was, I believe, over 70 data points, but we didn't have visibility exactly on what the base treatment was that they were comparing it to, because quite often between Canada and US there's differences in maybe the standard treatment, right? So what I was excited last year when we had in 2021, actually, when we had you know, really good growing conditions, is our data set lined right up with that. It was actually a bit above. It was that 1.3 bushel advantage. So that tells me, you know, strength in numbers. That's our data set of about 10 sites with plus that 70. That was, you know, they were still in line, and that gave me a lot of confidence. But then when we had such a dry year, and you're worried about, you know, bacterial colonization, which is what has to happen with that bacteria once it gets in the ground and gets some water accessed and starts sporulating. What you need is that colonization. That colonization of any bacteria can be affected by, you know, just out of the regular zone of temperatures or moisture. So I was a little bit worried, and not seeing the height differences. Of course, I was worried, but what I did see in a couple of these trials, and you can see the one towards the right there, Gads Hill. That's one location that I saw this, but where there was cyst present, just anecdotally, as I was taking relative samples throughout the field between the treatments, is what I actually did see was no difference in root mass, but I did see lower incidence of cyst on the roots. So you might have 1 plant or 0 plants with Draco out of 5 that you pick, whereas the non-Draco, that's in the same zone with the, you know, relatively same looking plants right close to each other, might have had 3, 4, or 5 plants out of those 5 that had cyst, and then on those roots of the ones that had cyst on either treatment, there's also less actual cysts on the roots. So you might have 1 or 2 cysts on the Draco of that 1 plant or 2 plants that was impacted, and then the other treatment, the base treatment that had more plants impacted. When you looked at all those, there was 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on, cysts. So what it gave me confidence there is it is, even with in a tough year where it is being the colonization likely is being impacted to some degree, there's still it's still doing its job, and it's still helping to suppress the SCN from entering the root system. So if you look at this data set here, this is 25 sites, and it's a win rate of 74%. So the important thing here is traditionally what we've seen from other biologicals out in the market, as well as we did have one previous one ourselves in soybeans specific to SCN called Clariva. And what we did see is a lower win rate, just because as a biological, there's so much more at play, so many more interactions with the native culture of the soil, what moisture is received, temperatures, soil type, all sorts of things, management practices. And so it's really hard to get a very tight and specific level of confidence and win rate, because there's just so much stuff going on, even within a field, pH, stuff like that. So the good news is with Draco, what we've seen so far has been that 74% right there, and that gives me a lot of confidence, because that's similar to what we'd see out of some chemical seed treatments. So that's 75 to 80% in that area. So that gives me a lot of confidence, and with the relatively low price of this seed treatment, it gives a really good ROI story. Even not too many growers would get excited over conservatively say a bushel, but even at normalized commodity prices and everything, 1 bushel is still going to pay for the price that the product costs. So that's what really excites me about it, and I hope you can share in that excitement, and maybe get a few growers out there to trial this and try it on their farm and see how it fits within your territory.